about rebellion.
That's the crap.
Hi, welcome back to Four on the Floor. Our next topic, Led Zeppelin. A whole lot of love, or does the song remain the same? They redefined rock and roll. Heavy, raw, and raunchy. Led Zeppelin gave us Jimmy Page's blazing guitar, Robert Plant's banshee-like vocals, John Paul Jones's booming bass, and the thundering drums of John Bonham.
We were everything, really. We touched so many different areas of just the normal sort of the blues and rock and the acoustic, but then we also went into other areas as well.
From the bluesy strains of Whole Lotta Love to the mystical rhythms of Kashmir, Zeppelin embraced musical styles from all over the world.
It's all hippie stuff. Let's do away with the hippies once and for all.
From the big hair metal bands of the 80s to the alternative rockers of today, Zeppelin's impact is obvious. But are these bands paying tribute, like on the newly released Encomium?
Linda, our singer, I think she can really cop the whole Robert Plant vibe pretty well for a chick.
Or ripping off a classic sound in hopes of cashing in? And what about Stairway to Heaven, the most requested, most played track on radio? Can fans stand to hear it one more time? Atlantic Records thinks so. They're releasing Stairways to Heaven, a compilation of 12 new arrangements of the classic tune.
When I talk to people on the street who are raving about Led Zeppelin, they don't just talk about what you hear every day. Who wants to hear Stairway to Heaven every day when you've got Kashmir in the Light?
And now, 15 years since the band's demise, Page and Plant are on tour, putting Led Zeppelin back in the spotlight. So are Page and Plant venturing into uncharted musical territory?
I don't want to hear Led Zeppelin unplugged. Plug their ass in.
Or is this just classic Zepp rehashed for the 90s? Okay, JD, a quick rundown on the dynamics of this reappreciation of Led Zeppelin.
Well, it's really funny. In the 70s, up until about the time of punk rock, Led Zeppelin was literally the biggest band in the world. And then with punk, when things changed, I mean, Zeppelin was like put in with all the other big dinosaur bands like Pink Floyd and the Queen and so forth and so on, and they suddenly were no longer considered hip, and they didn't really change too much. They put out one record before John Bonham died, and then they ceased existing. So through the early 80s, it was not a hip thing to like Led Zeppelin. And about 1983, 84, you started having some alternative rockers saying, yes, Led Zeppelin is cool. I think one of the, Let's Act It was one of the first bands to really come out to say, yes, we grew up on Led Zeppelin, this was great music. Then when the Beastie Boys sampled Led Zeppelin stuff onto their album, it added another layer of cool. And by the end of the decade, Led Zeppelin were once again considered to be gods. Everyone was waiting for Page and Plant to get back together again.
A similar dynamic to the Carpenters, are you suggesting?
No, a completely different dynamic.
They could never get back together.
I understand. I mean, but there is a difference. We have Page and Plant out on the road, and they're touring and they're successful, but it's not the same. You know, it's not the same, is it, Chris?
Certainly not. I mean, it's many years later, and I'm sure there's a lot of different stuff going through their heads. The people that they're playing for are different, and they don't have John Bonham and John Paul Jones with them. Most importantly.
Were you influenced by the band? Did you like Led Zeppelin?
Heavily, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in a a quartet with a empty-handed frontman. So I mean, it's like Mick Jagger. It's really hard to get past Robert Plant as a singer in an electric rock and roll band. And yeah, when we were putting the band together, in particular, I went back to Led Zeppelin and just started listening to Robert Plant specifically, just to see I was like, God, these guys are really loud. How do I sing over them? I mean, that's just a classic problem.
It's eerie how influential he's been, though. I saw the Rolling Stones live, and I walked out of the show thinking that was who Axl Rose wanted to be, Mick Jagger. But he really wants. Robert Plant is the god of all that, the hair and bulge and
hair
screaming.
And bulge, yeah.
And screaming.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw Led Zeppelin you know, I grew up, I mean, they were, yeah, really, they were the band. I mean, everything you like about rock and roll, everything you hated about rock and roll, they were the band. They were the soundtrack to everything. And, you know, I mean, you know, my mother would not let me go see Led Zeppelin. I mean, it was, those shows were wild back in the 70s. And that was the reason when I got into punk rock, why we hated Led Zeppelin so much, because they were so excessive. And because, to their credit now, you could say they refused to change. I mean, the Stones were hateable, but they sort of mutated with the times. They did a disco song, they tried to tone it down. Led Zeppelin was like, no. I mean, Robert Plant looks, except for obvious facial wear and tear, it looks basically the same as he did in the 60s.
But you know what's interesting is they refused to change in some respects, but in other respects they were always changing. I mean, Led Zeppelin was a band that did not have a sound. I mean, they were them, they had a personality, but they did not have a sound. And that's really probably the greatest injustice that's done to this band is call them the forerunners of heavy metal. They were not the forerunners of heavy metal, they were not a heavy metal band.
So much more. And Robert Plant is so much more than a screamer,
Exactly.
too. I mean, he's a great blues singer. And they were so dynamic. They had really soft songs and really heavy songs.
And you know, the thing is that in Plant's singing, he's somebody who can actually take sort of a mini history of American popular music, because he draws from the blues, he draws from Celtic folk music, he draws from music outside of the Americas and Europe, and he puts it all together in one sound, which is literally what rock and roll has done as a process over the last 40 years.
And he did it in that way where he didn't appear to be aping, which a lot of British singers always came off that sort of, you know, I always found it very interesting when I was growing up that a lot of the black kids I know really hated the Rolling Stones, but they all loved Led Zeppelin. And I think because there was...
Not this one.
Well, some of the black kids, I don't speak for everyone. But I'm saying that you never got the feeling with Led Zeppelin that they were imitating.
But you know, they always got slammed for that. In fact, the early reviews in Rolling Stone by John Mendelsohn in particular just reamed them inside and out for ripping off old blues licks and for not giving credit to the blues people that they were thinking.
What about Jimmy Page? What did he bring to the party? I mean, he changed.
He brought Satan. He brought Satan to the party.
No. I mean, I hate to be Mr. correcting misconceptions here, but the other, I mean, they actually, everyone makes that devil Led Zeppelin thing, but people forget Led Zeppelin actually did gospel songs.
Right.
I mean, Nobody's Fault But Mine is a song about if I don't read the Bible and I don't live a good life and I don't go to heaven, it's nobody's fault but mine. Blind Willie Johnson recorded originally, and Led Zeppelin did a killer version.
Can I just ask, Chris, let's go around. Chris, what's your favorite Led Zeppelin album?
Favorite Led Zeppelin album, Houses of the Holy.
Oh, I love that album.
JD?
For sure.
I'd have to say the third album. I love the acoustic stuff, and it's just amazing.
Scott?
Well, I have to admit, on national television, I've never played a Led Zeppelin album from start to finish, so I don't have one. I do, however, love Robert Plant's solo stuff. I discovered Robert Plant on MTV in the early 80s with the solo stuff and the Honey Tripper stuff he did, which I love.
I have to say that outside of Whole Lotta Love and like Kashmir, I never knew the titles to any Led Zeppelin songs, so they all sort of became like, I never knew the titles, but the first album I ever bought with my own money was the second Led Zeppelin album.
Is it the last album you ever bought with your own money, too? Okay, I'm just checking. All right, when we come back, we're going to find out what's hot, what's not, and whatever's on these folks' minds. Stay with us.
But that was last week that I bought the album.
Never liked him.
Great guitar player.
Always hate it.
The VH1 Weekend Special. Every Saturday and Sunday.
Great guitar player.
Always hit it.
Hi, welcome back to Four on the Floor. Now, this is a part of the show where these folks get to talk about whatever's on their minds. What's on your mind, Amy?
Well, I was telling Chris off camera that before, you know, I wasn't really into his look because he sort of looked like the Hobbit before, you know, but he's kind of looking fly
You're
now.
looking good, Chris.
You know?
Way to go.
Thank you. You know, what can I say, you know? The thing that's on my mind right now musically is this new Neil Young record that's going to be coming out hopefully by the time this show airs, and it's called Mirror Ball, and it features another act, and it doesn't even really matter that this other act is on the record because this is one of the strongest records that he's done in a really long time. I mean, like most people, I've been a Neil Young fan, and I've been a Neil Young fan through all his phases, and this is just a really solid, good rock and roll record, and it's noisy and it's melodic and it's passionate, and I think it's a really good indication to a lot of other quote-unquote older artists that you can embrace newer music and make it work for you, that you don't have to be afraid of it. And it's called Mirror Ball, and it's coming out, I believe, in late June.
And that other act, of course, being Pearl Jam, who you won't see mentioned anywhere.
No,
Their names are on the album individually, but not as
they
Pearl
function
Jam.
as Crazy Horse, basically. And to be honest, I mean, they sound great, but it's just a solid Neil Young record.
Chris?
Well, I've been hearing all this stuff in the newspaper about us going to Bosnia, and I think that a lot of kids are going to die over there. It's not going to be like the Gulf War, and I really hope that we don't go. And you guys were talking about the neo-hippie movement last week, and if there really are hippies in the world, I always thought a hippie was a person who protested the Vietnam War or protested war. And so if there really is a hippie movement, I haven't heard anybody like protesting that. If I'm supposed to be a hippie, which I don't think I am, but if I'm supposed to be one, you know, maybe I should be the first one to say, let's not send all our young friends to die over there.
JD.
Because they will.
Yeah. One of the things I've been listening to lately has been this new soundtrack from Batman Forever. And what's interesting about this, apart from the fact it's got a really good U2 single on it, is that it's one of the few multi-artist soundtracks I've ever heard where it all fits together like an album. I mean, the U2 song flows very naturally in PJ Harvey, which flows very naturally into an amazingly funky Brandy song. And it goes on, it's got Seal, it's got Eddie Reader, who I mentioned earlier in the show, and a lot of acts you wouldn't have heard of, and many acts you would have. It's a very solid, who knows, maybe better than the movie. I haven't
The
seen the movie.
Massive Attack cut is very good on that, too.
Yeah, a version of Hunter Gets Captured by the Game, the old
Right.
Smokey Robinson tune.
Yeah.
Scott.
Well, I'm having a very spiritual relationship to the new Rod Stewart single. It's called Leave. It's called Leave
Amazing.
Virginia Alone, and it's written by Tom Petty, one of Tom's finest songs lately that I've been into, and I'm kind of spiritually connected to it because Rod Stewart does his best Sam Cooke thing in his improvs at the end, and my mom's name is Virginia, and I love her. So.
You know, and there's an album that I got. Every once in a while, a record comes my way that I just can't stop listening to. That's the case with this new album by Johnny Johnson. It's called Johnny Be Back. He is the piano player for Chuck Berry. He's put out a couple records. This one is unbelievable. It's got a Phoebe Snow doing some incredible vocals. If you guys